Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Decred In Depth Live. I'm your host, Eduardo, and today we have a very special guest, someone who is well known in the Decred community. He has been a long time member of the community. And actually, his first appearance was on Decred Assembly. For those of you who've been around for a long time, you'll know about Decred Assembly. Notsofast. He is a altcoin miner, a charter, a Twitter persona, if you will. And he does so many things in the space, so much wisdom. Very lucky to have a bit of his time. So without further ado, hello, Not So
Hey, thanks
Fast.
for the warm welcome. Thanks. It's really great to be here. Thanks, man. It's exciting to get the chance to talk to you and talk about Decred and hang out with the community a bit.
Yes, and before we get started, everyone, there has been so many community questions. It's been the most publicized live stream we've done. So how we're going to approach this is I've compiled a list of questions, and we're going to try to take it, kind of rapid fire, because I want to be able to have Not So Fast just impart as much wisdom on all of us as possible. And so the first question, Not So Fast, is a little bit of a jokester one, but how fast are you actually?
This is a pretty hilarious question because I don't think I've ever been asked that. Um, there's going to be a few non-wisdom shitposty style answers to some of these questions, and I hope that's okay. But the answer to that would be like I'm average speed. I'm just an enthusiast, like most of everybody else here, doing things at my own pace. There's a lot that I don't understand, um, and there's a lot that I've had to learn and relearn because it's cryptocurrency is pretty complex and it's not easy to keep it all in one brain if that brain is mine. So not as fast as my name might suggest.
Fair, fair. Tell us a little bit about your background. I'm sure a lot of people will know, but tell us and also explain how did you first get into Decred?
Okay, so I originally got into cryptocurrency from mining Dogecoin. Though I knew about Bitcoin earlier, I thought Dogecoin was a sort of friendlier, uh, more more user friendly and attractive to non crypto users and non technological nerds or whatever than Bitcoin was itself. And then it didn't take me long before I recognized the benefits of Bitcoin as kind of like the apex cryptocurrency. But at the time, there were a lot of attempts, some serious and some way less serious, to compete with Bitcoin. And the reason I got into Decred was sort of Decred's entire um, beginning sort of ethos was a product suite called BTC Suite that was developed for Bitcoin, but not integrated in. And so all that interesting work was kind of by consensus said kicked off to the side from Bitcoin. And rather than kind of leave it to rot or not use that value at all, it was determined that maybe it should be incorporated into its own cryptocurrency with, I guess, kind of an airdrop distribution to maximize fairness of ownership at the outset. And that kind of brings us to where we are today. I mean, I got the airdrop, I signed up for it. I didn't dump it. In fact, I sort of figured that this had legs enough to maybe buy some other people's dumps, and so I've never sold any of my airdrop Decred. I've just held it and kind of added to the position, and then stake more as soon as I could. So uh, in that respect alone, it's kept me involved and interested just from the economics of it. And I know that's not for everybody, but I was I was loyal to my airdrop and thankful for it.
For sure, for sure. Uh, what was it about Decred that is compelling and competitive? And this question comes from Checkmate.
Sure. Okay. So there's because it's been around for a long time. Um, what first attracted to me to it is a little different than what keeps me and others, I think, involved in it. When Decred first launched, it was sort of viable to take on Bitcoin as a true altcoin, like a true alternative cryptocurrency that might be more successful than Bitcoin, or be a permanent long-term competitor with Bitcoin. And the space for that when Decred first launched was a lot larger. So it's attractive because you always want to, if you can't get in on the main thing, the mindset is that you would hope to get in on the next main thing if that first main thing should ever die out. And that's sort of like the altcoin thesis in general. But as cryptocurrency and Bitcoin especially has progressed along the Lindy curve of adoption and continuing to thrive the longer it has already thrived, a lot of the altcoins as direct competitors to Bitcoin have dropped away and fallen away because Bitcoin has its first mover advantage effect, and that's really strong, and nobody would really wish that to go away. However, the cryptocurrencies that haven't dropped away from that sort of direct competitorship, and we can get into this with some of the other questions that you prepared, is that Decred's a pretty good alternative for money simply because it's got built-in software upgradability. So, it's kind of diametrically opposed to Bitcoin in that Bitcoin wants to ossify a simple protocol that's small enough to remain distributed over a lot of different users over time, right? And Decred's slightly more complex, but not too much more complex, but it's got DAO enabled and stakeholder enabled votable upgradability of the software over time. And so I think that's enough of a yin versus yang that the value proposition of Decred as an alternative money to Bitcoin over the really long term is going to continue to be compelling.
In general, what do you look for in deciding which cryptocurrencies to invest slash get involved in?
Oh my gosh. So when I was spec mining or speculative mining, um, criteria were almost secondary to how early I was. So if I was the first person to notice the post of a new cryptocurrency, um, I didn't have to do much more than like 10 or 15 seconds of reading and back of the napkin tokenomics to decide for myself whether, okay, there's an opportunity play here. Maybe it's extremely short term, or maybe there's not very much going on here that I can understand, but I'll take a crack at it anyway because the sort of market's favorable and bubbly right now, or, oh, this looks terrible. It's got a 90% pre-mine, I'll just pass. Same thing with tokens. If you're speculating, then early is better than any kind of fundamentals that you can get out of it. And a lot of what goes on with tokens as the space has matured is there are insiders, there are VC backers, there are other people who are earlier to the money than you. These aren't fair distributed cryptocurrency networks. They are 100% ventures. And if you're just hearing an announcement, all the insiders are behind that announcement and they've already had their chances to buy in. So it's a it's a similar game, but the key difference is that nobody's pretending that some of these altcoin networks are going to be competitors to Bitcoin. These are all sub ventures or financial experiments or Ponzi schemes or whatever you want to call them, of varying quality, most to the low end, some to the decent end, but they're all venture projects given life by the virtue of the existence of more established cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Decred and others.
I heard you use the past tense when I was speculative mining. Is it fair to say then that you no longer mine altcoins?
I do, but
Do,
it's not sort of speculative launch mining like I used to. It's more, I still have some GPUs, which actually aren't currently running, but I have some ASICs that are currently running. And they've paid for themselves, but I continue to run them because in a really heady bull blow off top market, a rising tide lifts kind of all boats in all markets. We got a little taste of that earlier this year, but in my opinion, that wasn't the main one. So I continue to mine just because it's a good use of staying tapped into the ecosystem of mining. And I don't actually have any Bitcoin miners. All my miners are script or other proof of work algorithms. But it's a way of staying tapped in to long-term speculation that the entire sort of cryptocurrency space will grow, and I'll earn a return on my investment if I just continue to mine and hold and kind of continue the electricity expenditure as a lost cause for the time being. It's like buying lottery tickets, basically.
With that being said, can you give us a high level overview of the mining landscape, domestically, abroad? We've heard a lot about, China, and, it seems like Texas is another thing that comes into the forefront often. So can you just give us a high level overview?
Yeah, you know what? If I'm giving a high level overview, it's because I've flown so high up, and there's so much industry being built on the ground that I barely see anything anymore. And you could say, and you'd have a lot of weight behind it, that I've I've aged out of the system, because I was always a hobby mining enthusiast, right? And as mining grew and became industrial, there was a time in 2017 and 2018 where I was like in talks with startups and groups to do deals with larger things, and it was just more of a commitment than I ever wanted to do. I liked the idea of being nimble and being able to operate from my own basement or my own garage with miners. And so when things went industrial and got a little more buttoned up and a little more um, a little less nimble and having to abide by the rules of polite industry, I guess, as we call it, my interest in the whole thing sort of waned. So I, as a result of that, I kind of don't keep deep tabs on what people like SG Barber are doing with creating mobile pods full of Bitcoin miners and planting them on natural gas flares and using that trapped, orphaned power instead of wasting it mining Bitcoin with it, which I think is awesome. I know about it, but because I didn't start a company at the time he did, I'm not tapped in to give you a high level overview like he could. But basically, what you and the community all kind of know is true. The Chinese crackdown on Bitcoin miners caused an exodus of all this equipment to flow out of the country and into whoever had access to cheap electricity or good logistics to get something somewhere. There was some pent up demand with the rise in price of Bitcoin, and so it's kind of nice that that has um, left the potential control of a somewhat autocratic regime and gone all over the world. Though you're right, a lot of it has gone to Texas, which is a good place, and it's pretty free as in freedom. So I can only say that it's optimistic, at least for Bitcoin mining. And as for altcoin mining, you don't really hear about it, but there is a significant amount of ASIC equipment that got pushed right out of China alongside everything, and it did go around the same places. Bitcoin's obviously the biggest, but there's plenty of the other stuff out there too that all left China, and people who have a little higher appetite for risk and maybe a little better deal on their own infrastructure are running some alongside Bitcoin miners, or maybe they're just doing that because they got a great deal on the gear. But yeah, that's all I really know of what's going on. Is not a whole lot more than anyone else.
Decred uses Blake 256 instead of Shaw 256. Why is this differentiation useful for the network?
I guess it's always good to not be in direct competition with Bitcoin for a proof of work hash rate. And if you can possibly, it's best to be the largest consumer of a given proof of work algorithm. Um, this is if you're a proof of work only cryptocurrency. If you have another mechanism, consensus mechanism securing your network, like Decred does with proof of stake, you don't really have to be the most dominant in your POW algo. But yeah, Blake 256 fundamentally, there's not a huge difference between SHA-256. I mean, they're both different algorithms that hash, and I think Blake 256 uses a significant amount less computational energy per hash than Bitcoin, but it doesn't really matter because they're apples to oranges. And that's something a lot of people kind of get wrong is they compare hash rates of one um, POW algo to another. And you can't really. The best thing to compare is direct energy consumption, or I like to boil it down into mining units. So like a standard mining unit for Bitcoin for a long time was like an S9. Now it's an S17 or whatever. And then I don't have a Decred ASIC, so I don't know what the standard single comparable costed, comparable energy consuming mining unit of Decred would be. For a long time, it was GPUs. I believe there have been ASICs for a while. I was actually part of a company that tried to start making ASICs and then got shut down by the existing oligopoly of fabrication. But that's another tangent we could talk about later. Um, the bottom line is, on a certain level, there's not much difference. It just matters that there is a difference. And for proof of work only cryptocurrencies, um, you have to be dominant in your algo. For Decred, which also is secured by proof of stake, you don't have to be, which is kind of nice, because a 51% attack, even if that hash rate is freely available, can't beat the proof of stake consensus. Can only beat it on proof of work.
A lot of really good insights there. I hadn't thought about, like you said, comparing just the number of units and then total energy consumption. I never thought about that. In general, are ASICs a good or a bad thing for a proof of work network, and why?
So I used to think they were just kind of all bad because they imposed kind of they prevented a miner from switching to any other given cryptocurrency like you can with a GPU. Um, Now I think they're good because as more value has become to live on networks like Bitcoin and Decred, it matters that there is machinery out there that can only apply electricity to secure that network, which means that there's no alternative for that machine. There's no alternative function for that machine. It's either on and securing the network, or it's off because it's not worth it to secure that network. And so, for the largest and highest value and most established cryptocurrencies, it's good to have ASICs because if, like I said, if you're the highest consumer of a certain proof of work algorithm, that's kind of locked up. Like somebody has to do an economic attack purchasing hash rate in order to destabilize that ecosystem. And that's not easy to do. It's costly to do, prohibitively almost in most cases. So yeah, generally ASICs are a good thing. Though I still like GPUs as a sort of Kickstarter proof of work. And there's lots in between. If there's one thing I learned from people like Oh God, a girl who has done a lot of work in the cryptocurrency proof of work industry, it's that there's a very blurred line between, ASICs are application specific, but there's different degrees of specificity that you can build hardware with. She knows a million times more about this than me. I only know what I listen to and what I understand of what she says and what the other people in her circle say. But there are things like FPGAs that they're field programmable gate arrays, and there are some ASICs made out of this. They can do they can get a little bit more economic efficiency on some algos than GPUs, and approach ASIC like specificity. And even within ASICs, there are some, not many, but some changes that can be made to augment the profitability of an ASIC or switch it to a certain type of mining. It depends how the ASIC's built. There are some ASICs that, of course, can't be changed whatsoever. But then again, she knows more about it than I do.
You earlier alluded to the fact that mining has become very industrialized, and you've obviously not been as involved since then. So I know that your answer will be limited in some capacity, but still more knowledge than a lot of us will have. Um, But in general, how are people thinking about deploying capital in regards to mining rigs and in terms of uh, investment and like what time? You know, like can you give some an idea of some of the variables they may be thinking about?
Yeah, I still get asked the question because I have people that, they have an opportunity. Um, Most recently, there was someone that said, "Hey, I have some people kind of on an island in the middle of an ocean that may have access to some power and they want to do some mining. What advice could you give me?" And so most of the opportunity that exists is there's infrastructure. There's like a dam somewhere spilling water in a country where somebody comes from there or somebody's family comes from there and they speak the language and they think, oh, this would be a good way to boost the economics of the area. And we know there's skilled people there that can be taught to like manage the machines, and it's easy to get equipment there. So maybe we can make this happen. And so I sort of try to make sure someone's aware of all the possible risks. So specifically for like an island in the middle of a giant body of water, logistics is a big deal. Getting equipment to and from there. Flooding is a concern. Do they have the electricity supply that they say they do? How stable is it? They could say, oh yeah, we have, one whole megawatt, but what they're not telling you is they're trying to attract your investment, and they have that one whole megawatt, but it's intermittent at about 60%. And 9 months of the year, there's like flooding or rainstorms and it's not available at all. So there are things like that that you really have to consider before you mobilize capital, because it's way more capital intensive. And I would always make this sort of this capital risk assessment on my own as a hobbyist, but it would only be in the terms of, oh, why is this guy getting rid of this ASIC? Is it not working properly? And I would take it and I'd be like, oh, I can hear it through a brick wall when I'm like outside down the street. That's why he got rid of it, like that's the level on as a hobbyist that I like to sort of risk assess. And eventually, I started thinking bigger as things started getting bigger. But that's there's a large business and industrial aspect that you have to consider, as well as knowing the mining. So if you've got knowledge of an area and of a surplus of energy, or you have connections, that's a really good place to start. But you have to round it out because capital is a big thing to risk, and mining equipment varies greatly in price and in supply and demand. I know some hobbyist miners that have bought when prices are low from people who are capitulating, and then when everybody wants to get into mining, they sell them for twice what those miners ever sold for at retail. And they make more on the ASIC sales or the GPU sales than they ever did from the mining proceeds. That's
Very
another function
interesting.
of it, at least at the hobbyist level. Yeah.
How did I'm going to switch topics now? Done with mining.
Sure.
How did you get into trading, and how do you approach trading crypto markets in terms of accumulating Bitcoin, in terms of accumulating maybe a specific altcoin, or in terms of accumulating USD?
Um, so that's a pretty awesome question. I have a background as a trader. One of my first ever like desk jobs was just as a prop trader. So I had a little bit of the always looking at your screen, always sweating at a candle going up or down, and never getting up from your seat unless you were flat because you might be losing money. Pretty stressful thing that only younger people can really take, and even not for that long. But it did give me a bit of an education and insight and an edge while I was doing the speculative mining. Now my thesis is closer to, if I'm profitable no matter what I'm doing, um, I roll things into what I call my blue chips. And that's a mix, I guess, a weighted mix, and it's not like tightly weighted. I don't usually rotate from one into the other. I'm not that good at following the macro. But it's Bitcoin and Ethereum and Decred and like a small handful of others. And for the most part, those are just buy and hold until um, much later in my life. I guess there's a paradigm shift, and all this stuff is money or directly usable as money. So we're obviously not quite there yet, but those are all sort of my long-term holds. And given my timing of entry into a lot of these markets, I probably could have done better flipping things around, but I like to set a good example for the security component of this as well. There's a lot to be said for keeping your wallets cold rather than trade and expose private keys to the internet and um, create conspicuity to yourself if your funds are tracked by an exchange or your Ethereum addresses are being tracked by anyone from following on traders to government agencies to people who want to try and hack you or $5 wrench attack you. It's good to leave funds cold as a matter of course if you believe in the fundamental value proposition and you don't need the money right away for whatever. If it's like long term investment, leave it cold. I think that's almost just as good advice as finding what's the safest investment and rotating into it. So that's not much trading. It's a lot of not trading. But most recently, I started getting into a little bit of like low stakes trading just to try and keep my skills sharp for when the bull market and another potential blow off top cycle does come back to us, because I want to better take profits off the table than I did in 2018. I think I could have done a lot better. And most of, I feel like I did fine. Most of the suffering that I've done since then was self-imposed, beating myself up over misplaying things. But, you know, um, that's kind of the nature of playing risky markets, right? Like you always think, oh, I definitely could have played that better. And yeah, that's basically what I want to learn now. So I feel like I'm doing well now in that I'm knowing my strengths. I'm not a good trader, so I don't overtrade. I do as little as possible to try and keep my skills as sharp as I can get them, and maybe learn slowly, but not so much that it feels like a chore or like it's not enjoyable. And I play where I'm most interested, as I always did with altcoins, like newly released things. And I was pretty late to the DeFi space, but I got really interested in that last year, and as well as the whole NFT scene, which I've sort of been into since 2018, but it really kind of blossomed in the past year or so.
What are some of your favorite indicators?
Oh gosh, so I don't draw lines on charts. I look at candlesticks only. I don't even have a moving average line on my charts. Um, if I my whole ethos is I spent so much time as a prop trader staring at 1 minute and 5 minute and 15 minute and 1 hour stick charts, is that if I can't get an intuitive sense of what a good level to place an ad liquidity order is, um, if I have to draw a line, all I do is zoom out of a chart or zoom into it and see if my perspective on whether it's a good level to place an order at changes, and then I just kind of leave it. Like I don't use indicators. That's the
Okay.
long and short of it. And to give an example, like I looked at the BTC USD chart last night, stuck a couple buy orders out there. They both filled while I was asleep, and they're not losing me money right now, so that's, that's not the worst thing in the world, I guess. But yeah, I don't use indicators. I more use rely on my own, I guess, intuitive um, understanding of what a good to buy chart looks like and a good to sell chart looks like, and that's pretty much it.
This is kind of a follow-up question. Would you say a lot of that is just based off your understanding of like human behavior and emotion, or is it based off of a long history of having looked at charts and seeing how things tend to do in terms of like repeated trend behavior?
Yeah, it's the latter, but I would say it's even lower on the mental hierarchy than that. I like to watch the candlesticks form, watch the tape, watch what's trading, watch the order book as sizable orders are piling in or out of it. I like to be able to tell if a seller is fakely suppressing a market or whatever. And but that's usually at the time where I'm trying to exit something either in profit or or cut a loss. Is I'm trying to analyze the kind of momentary action. So yeah, it's way more looking at the charts rather than considering any kind of fundamentals. Although I always have a long-term bullish bias on all cryptocurrency. So I try to make myself nearly always go long instead of short. Just as a matter of course, like I try to keep it mentally simple for myself and not overtrade. So I figure, well, if I have a long-term bullish bias, I should mostly just be looking for good spots to long, because if I'm under considering the technicals or the fundamentals at the very least, or if I make a mistake at the very least, like I'll get stuck in a long-term play that will eventually, go my way, as long as my long-term view doesn't change. And it hasn't in the years that I've been involved with crypto.
What is more important in your mind, DCR slash USD or DCR slash BTC?
This is a really cool question because for me, for my thesis, for a very long time, I would try and tell people like, yeah, USD pairings don't matter. You only care about BTC pairings. And I would say that I've been proven almost 100% wrong in the past, since the 2017-2018 bull market. USD matters a whole lot more given the rise of stablecoins and their fundamentality to all of the DeFi markets in terms of being one half of a liquidity pair for nearly everything that is driven, decentralized liquidity. So that being the case, it still matters for certain things, and especially Decred, because Decred started off life as a direct competitor to Bitcoin. I would call it a true altcoin, in that it is, you could call it value prop Bitcoin, but better upgradability. And that's worth consideration in nearly all long-term aspects as against BTC rather than against USD. Um, for short-term trading, you should only really be trading USD pairs if you're doing DeFi stuff, or I answered my own question. Yeah, you gotta be considering USD short-term. But if you're in the space to stack cryptocurrency and sovereign money, and you believe in the value proposition that it offers versus inflation and the money printer going burr, then you always want to be parking profits in cryptocurrency rather than fiat. And so I would say for Decred, the BTC pairing is more important than most, especially for long-term believers of its value proposition as a direct competitor.
Do you have a mental model for how high DCR can go in the next 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, this is pretty fun. So the main catalyst for DCR going really high, and we're talking about ceilings here, so maximum optimism. I think that there's a strong and growing narrative that Ethereum, by use and by market cap metrics, eventually can outperform Bitcoin, as Ethereum's use cases, and I'm only talking about use cases. I'm not talking about any other fundamentals here. As its use cases and its directly observable usage outpaces that of Bitcoin, at least in a measurable transactional value aspect. So once Ethereum breaks the Bitcoin market cap ceiling, it's kind of open season for a bunch of other speculative competitors to do the same. And we both know that Decred has a lot of big, smart backers who are playing the long game with it, as well as small, smart backers who also understand its value prop and are playing the long game. And so I think, very simply, Ethereum's USD based market cap flipping Bitcoins puts a huge ceiling on Decred as a competitor to Bitcoin. And I'm not sure what that ceiling is. You could maybe think of it in terms of comparative market cap. So if if that's like 2% of Bitcoin's USD market cap, that's pretty good. If it's 20% of Bitcoin's USD market cap, like if Ethereum has really ripped the top off that, that we could see something that high. Of course, this is all speculative. There are plenty of other basis for argument that would put it at like 0.01% of Bitcoin's eventual market cap, because the arguments for Bitcoin being the hardest money and the anchor for all this other stuff to happen at all is pretty strong. But I think that narratives matter almost more than fundamentals in the way the markets work currently. And the Bitcoin versus Ethereum narrative is really kind of neck and neck without any regard to the fundamentals of one being better than the other. And if Ethereum can post better metrics across the board, its narrative might overtake Bitcoin's for long enough of a time to really open the door for direct competitors to Bitcoin like Decred to run like crazy. And it would be irresponsible of me to actually pick spots, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. In fact, I expect Decred's all-time high versus Bitcoin to be tested and broken, probably doubled. So that's a good enough prediction, I guess.
What are your thoughts on the DCRDEX and how it impacts Decred's ecosystem moving forward? Thank you, Permeable Nino, for this
So
question.
yeah, thanks, Nino. So I've minimally used the DCRDEX, and I think the reason is because more of the attention is on Ethereum based dexes right now. And so the question that matters to us right now is, where's Decred's piece of that? And I think the best answer to that is to not try and be something that Decred isn't, but rather Decred is a war chest, a powerhouse of stored value, looking for places to deploy itself. We don't need to build those places on our own necessarily if we can simply build bridges to the places where that exists. So what I'm getting at here is DCRDEX is fundamentally awesome piece of software for DCR to have. But as the volume and flow of decentralized finance has flowed towards EVM places like Ethereum, the most Decred has to do is build a bridge to and from those pools of liquidity, and its own DCRDEX will flourish. Now, this is just my personal opinion. Obviously, there's a governance system that would either vote for or against, or in a completely different sphere, right? That's the beauty of Decred's Politeia system, is that it can do that. And it's not the kind of thing that I would even myself put forth a proposal for, but it's good to have the DCRDEX because sovereignty matters in money, and exchange matters as well. And I think that with the runaway popularity of EVM based DeFi, we've forgotten a lot about the value of anonymity and the value of permissionless sovereign trade. And there's been a pretty big, at least in the US, which kind of leads the world, regulatory push just in the past week to sort of define and redefine some terms. And I feel like there's a crackdown, or at least a tightening of enforcement of clearer rules coming to all of DeFi. I'm not going to say that it's like malicious or evil. It's just kind of the way the world works. This is exploded, and now the regulatory powers are trying to clean up the explosion and rein it in so that they get a little more control. And I think Decred's DCRDEX is kind of outside of that space for now. Um, and when the dust clears and when sort of EVM DeFi is roped in and the scams are dried up and everything, that'll be the time for sovereign crypto trade to shine, where regulators with acting badly can't infect it.
This question I'm a little unclear about just because I don't know, but I'm going to ask it. Uh, what do you think
Yeah,
about
sure.
fiat trading solutions on DCRDEX integration with Bisque network?
Okay, so Bisque is it's pretty awesome. It's I I think it was the first ever decentralized protocol for cryptocurrency and fiat trading, and so you could just be an endpoint for, I think, P2P, like handshake, face to face transactions to onboard fiat into a cryptocurrency ecosystem. So it could work, and if Decred is staying true to its value prop as a Bitcoin competitor, it might be a good idea to make it work. I know there are some other nearly completely, if not completely, Bitcoin centric attempts to do the same thing already. But yeah, definitely a Decred integration um, with Bisque would be ideal. If it doesn't exist already, it probably should. Just as a part of building out the suite. Um, if Decred isn't available on hodl, which is a Bitcoin based, it's the decentralized replacement for local Bitcoins, which sort of got destroyed by KYC regulations. That would also be good. Just kind of um, anywhere Bitcoin already is, it would be a good idea for Decred to be too, as a direct competitor if it isn't already. And I think everybody understands that pretty well.
I want to start getting into, we've already been talking about it a little bit,
Yeah.
interoperability. But before um, I ask directly about interoperability, in your opinion and in your mind, how can Decred increase its network effects? You've been talking about, going to where Decred or where Bitcoin is, and we've been talking about integration with some of the EVM dexes. But what other ideas or general thoughts do you have about increasing network effect?
Yeah, this is always so hard because network effects are kind of where the crowd um, is coming and where the crowd wants to be, and at times it can be at odds with a cryptocurrency's core value proposition. So, like, I'm sure some people might want me to say we got to have NFTs on Decred, and that may be a good idea, but it might even be a better idea to allow for just like NFTs from any chain, including an EVM chain or otherwise, to be storable at a Decred address rather than on an Ethereum address or whatever, um, rather than recreate the entire NFT ecosystem, um, as many other blockchains are trying to do on Decred. So it's it's tricky to say because that question sort of ge- invokes a demand of what are people interested in right now, and we what can we do to get people's foot in the door. And I think that Decred's already been doing it just by staying true to its principles and its core value proposition. And really, there's nothing truer than like the voting process of what proposals get passed and what don't. And it's not a quick way to amass new network effect, but it is a slow grind that never goes down. Like, I never hear of people being like, "Oh, I'm done with Decred. I'm going to this coin." Like, it doesn't work that way. It's a slow uphill climb, and I If I had an idea of how to hasten that, I'd probably spit it out, but I don't think I do. I'm not that smart in that regard. I'm not a marketing powerhouse. I just kind of see it doing its own thing in the right way that I would expect, and it pays off, but it's a long term payoff.
So, before I dive into these next couple questions, this is going to be about interoperability and Lightning Network.
Sure.
I want you to, I want to put out kind of my thoughts because hopefully you'll be correcting me and maybe my mental model about thinking about these things is incorrect. Um,
Yeah.
but when I think about interoperability, I think about obviously Ethereum, and then some of these other layer ones that are popping up, like Solana, Polkadot, whichever Cardano, whatever your ilk is, and
Yeah.
and then I also think about Lightning Network. And the reason I think about that in the same context as interoperability comes primarily from Andreas Antonopoulos. He wrote Mastering Bitcoin, Mastering Ethereum, and then the Lightning Network. And he's given a series of speeches kind of talking about this idea of many coins, one network. And
Hmm.
and I'm interested to hear just your general thoughts, maybe even correct sort of my mental model on interoperability with, again, a lot of these smart contract blockchains. And then we'll move into Lightning
So
Network.
yeah, sure. So I think your mental model is correct, man. Like, I don't think there's anything for me to do to pick or poke at it. In fact, my own mental model for interoperability sort of got a massive shakedown over the past little while. One of the early and big bets I had made on interoperability was a sovereign cryptocurrency that, after a few pivots, sort of landed on the right place to create atomic swap based, not Lightning Network based DEX for all Bitcoin like UTXO chains. And they incorporated a whole bunch of different ones, but they just weren't getting uptake because it's a lot harder to make. I think I tweeted this earlier. It's a lot harder to build bridges from really far away and disparate islands than it is to rebuild the entire world within one ecosystem, so to speak, right? Like, if you build everything inside one ecosystem, as happened with Ethereum, interoperability is already part and parcel of that whole thing. And I was really skeptical of this, mostly because I had bet big on interoperability of things that mattered, like sovereign decentralized cryptocurrencies. And it turns out that, at least right now, that matters a whole bunch less to people, at least new people and people who are creating value. Um, and when I say creating value, I'm not really saying building long-term value, but they're creating these protocols within DeFi, kind of really fast iteration where lots breaks and lots gets hacked or gets screwed up. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but a it's not a space. I don't think it's like true interoperability where you take things that were created separately and you allow them to actually interoperate. Um, so I'm kind of just licking my wounds for getting that wrong, I would say. I'm not counting it out 100% though, because I do still think that the proposition of permissionlessness matters more than we realize right now. And as regulators start to flex their muscle against the more permission side of things worldwide, a lot of that value that's been built is going to have to either capitulate to the regulators or go somewhere that isn't as permissioned by them, or isn't permissioned by them at all. As long as Decred stays the course, Decred can be a haven for that kind of interoperability and trade. So I was wrong, but maybe not forever.
No, I really like that answer. What do you think about the current state of Lightning Network and Decred Lightning Network in particular?
So, to be brutally honest, I know very little about what's going on with Decred's implementation of the Lightning Network. Maybe you can fill me in on that.
My knowledge is we've obviously integrated it into the standard software wallet, and its usability is very easy. But other than that, I
Cool.
haven't heard of anything else in terms of applications being built on top of. But I'm very interested in these ideas.
Yeah. So, I think this is another good place to look at um, sort of development in parallel with Bitcoin. I'm not saying that Decred's got to go cut deals with, create its own strike or anything and cut deals with a South American country to use Decred as their money, though that would be awesome. But what Decred has going for it is there are a lot of stakers who run their own wallet node. And it would be awesome to get them also running by default a Decred Lightning node that has a small amount of collateral useful um, for micropayments like Lightning was supposed to be used for as its kind of primary source. And then once that builds out, there's a few like simple things you can build out with that, like micropayments for content and things like that. Tipping, just kind of like the initial flex tests to say, yep, this works as intended, and get people used to sending each other invoices for this, that, and the other. And then as far as what happens when that gets implemented, I guess it might be a nice thing to look towards what people are compelled to make a lot of transactions with, and of course that comes from the EVM space where you have all this DeFi stuff happening and all this transaction and trading and use of NFTs. So it would be cool if somehow that were integratable and uh, simple enough so that trading from a Decred wallet via Lightning invoice here and there was a great way to sort of like park all your long-term NFT holdings or securely use a DeFi protocol without it breaking, or have an extra signature so that a malicious Ethereum based contract couldn't raid your capital or anything like that. These are all just kind of partly off the top of my head, but really the most important part of this is that as a direct competitor to Bitcoin, it's a good idea to get it working as has already been done, and then find little footholds of general use. And that one advantage of, lots of people run a staking wallet, therefore lots of people could collateralize a Decred Lightning node and send and receive invoices. And one thing that I dearly wish about Lightning Network that hasn't happened yet is that it's not massively profitable to run a Lightning node. And that's why, the most of the development drivers for it have been altruistic, even with Bitcoin. And altruism's awesome. I agree that it's one of the most important things, but it's not directly short-term incentivized like big DeFi value and gains are. And so it takes a back seat. And that's not something that I know how to solve. That's human incentive. So I don't know how to do it. Would we make Lightning more expensive and Lightning node runners would earn more fees? Like, is that a solution? I don't think so, but I'm not sure what we do to make it compelling, because it's hard to make profitable given the other stuff that's out there.
For sure. Do you see any cool Lightning apps, laps being built? And do you have any, cool ones in your imagination or any cool Lightning use cases?
I wish I could say yes, man, but I paid less than no attention to it. I just follow the news based on what's going on with Lightning in general. My attention's so elsewhere. I've pretty much got my back to the Lightning network, which is embarrassing to say as someone who tries to see everything, but it's the truth.
Yes, there is so much to try to keep up with, and I think we're going to shift now to a topic that I think you've kept a little bit more up to date with NFTs and gaming. I know from having watched you on the internet, you're a little bit of a gamer. What are your thoughts about NFT gaming in general? And how are you thinking about Lightning development in terms of gaming, or maybe not thinking about?
Well, the cool thing about NFT enabled gaming is that a lot of gaming has to do with accrual of achievements or in-game assets, and in the old style of gaming, those assets persisted within the game. But once the game people stopped playing the game, or more players' attention shifted to a new game, the value of those assets sort of died alongside the network effects of that particular game. And I think what NFTs enable is persistent ownership, so that even though people aren't necessarily playing that game anymore, um, those NFTs and their unique identifiers could achieve new life as components in the next most popular game or the current most popular game. And one thing that Lightning really could enable for this to properly take off is NFTs mostly live in EVMs, and EVMs are woefully subject to gas prices. NFTs are most often, the joke is that they're all illiquid JPEGs, my liquid JPEG. So when it costs you a ton of money to send in a liquid JPEG or interact with it, it's a pain point. So if we could possibly integrate Lightning Network to send and interact with NFTs on a very large scale, because you may be a collector of in-game items and you get 1,000 in-game items, you want to craft 700 of them into a bunch of different stuff and farm them and sell them to other players. That's pretty intensive. So there are ETH L2s doing this right now. There's no reason why Lightning couldn't also do this. And I think that if sovereignty starts to matter more, then doing this on Lightning will start to matter more. I don't know how many, if any, people are actually working on that, but I have a feeling that there's enough talent and like coder talent out there that as soon as it becomes, I guess, as soon as the money tap starts to turn off of EVM L2s in terms of regulation, that the more sovereign options will start to look more and more attractive. And that's kind of an overarching theme to all of this, isn't it? Like, it's a pity and a shame that we don't care as much about sovereignty as we should, but fortunately, we have long-term options like Decred, which will be there when suddenly we have to start caring.
I completely agree.
Cool.
In your opinion, why are NFTs useful? I know members of the Decred community who joke on NFTs. Me, I've been an NFT collector since 2018.
Oh, cool,
And
man.
yeah, I'm a nerd gamer. And should Decred holders be thinking about NFTs in terms of the Decred blockchain?
That's hard to say. Like, there's a part of me that thinks that um, they're like a dalliance, like they're a whole separate thing from cryptocurrency, and they're in a way like money was the first killer app for cryptocurrency, but tokenized ownership, I think, as represented by NFTs, is quickly becoming the the second killer app of this. And as we start moving, like taking gaming more seriously across the board, um, in attention and monetary terms, and taking ownership of in-game achievements and assets as long-term persistent things, as we start to live more in metaverses and virtual worlds, it's only going to become more prevalent. And I'm old enough that it takes work for me to see it that way, but I know that the generation that would be the age of someone who would be my kids is going to grow up considering the metaverse and whatever you want to call it, virtual reality or game worlds, equally as important, or if not that more important than the real burdensome physical world where, oh, I have to go to the bathroom, oh, I have to eat, oh, I have to get a job and make money to subsist. Like it's way more fun to exist in a pretty vast virtual world of literal fun. So NFTs have also been deployed pretty seriously. Like when you provide liquidity in a certain range of pricing for the Uniswap v3 DEX, rather than get the same liquidity token as everybody else, just as a certain number of them that you did on Uniswap v2, because you've specified your own unique traits of liquidity range for Uniswap v3, you get issued an NFT as your chit for recouping that liquidity when you want to pull it. That's a pretty serious use case. It's got nothing to do with gaming. It's got nothing to do with art. It's your coupon, your coat check ticket for getting back your coat and not anybody else's coat. You don't want to lump it all together because you can't. And so that, I think, is when they did that, when they made that serious piece of liquidity redemption and NFT, I think it was a massively underappreciated step forward for all of that. And this is not to take a massive tangent from what we were talking about with NFTs being useful items in gaming or anything like that. It's just that permissionless, ubiquitously verifiable digital ownership matters. And if you want to know how much it matters, ask somebody who put up $10 million of liquidity into Uniswap v3. Ask them what that NFT is worth to them. It's worth $10 million, right? Like it's their coat check ticket for their $10 million coat. And that is one of many, many use cases. NFTs can be as worthless as a grain of sand, but they still represent ownership in quantity. And they would be different from tokens in that regard. For example, with a game's crafting system, if you have 50 million players of the most popular game currently, and you're crafting stuff within that system to sell or trade or use with other players, and there's decay of items and there's consumption of items. Every Minecraft voxel in a 50 million player Minecraft world could be its own unique NFT with the spatial coordinates that it came from or the rarity or what type it is. And when you've used it, that could matter for the function of all those players seeing a consistent, persistent, and synchronous game state. So, I don't even know if the processing power exists to make a game like that, but I'm sure somebody's working on stuff like that. There's lots of NFT enabled games already. They're simpler. They're like the Neon District RPG. They're like Axie Infinity, which is blowing up huge. And I'm salty I didn't get in on it because I didn't believe in the Axies, but I should have. And there's stuff like Gods Unchained, which is a sort of Hearthstone-like game, something that I don't really play much. And there's something that actually drops tomorrow called Parallel, that is a sci-fi based sort of collectible card gaming system that with some pretty cool mind-blowing art and everything. That's it. All those cards will be NFTs. So gaming, as it has with so many other things, is going to drive NFT use case and adoption forward. And we might not even understand it because it's more for like the generation coming up after us, where virtualization matters so much more to them. What we think of as trivial and valueless will be all the value in the world to them.
There's so many just gold nuggets in what you just said, and so thank you for that.
Cool, man.
I,
Thanks.
we're getting close to the end, and some of these last questions, just a disclaimer so people know, some of these are they're not as serious, but some of them are still very serious. But before we get into the, I guess what I consider a little bit more fun questions, I'd like you
Cool.
to give out, sort of like a general critique of in terms of what is Decred not getting right, and so that we can always be moving the stakeholders forward. In your opinion.
So this is a tricky thing to critique because Decred's prime prime piece of real estate is it's like Bitcoin with governance, human governance. And as we're seeing a lot in the Ethereum based DAOs, there are problems with governance that Decred inherits because it's being governed by the human stakeholders. And one example is where large voters can buy up a large portion of the assets and then just make ridiculously self-serving votes pushed through in their own interests. And I'm not saying that that's happening or happened with Decred. It happened in a big time in the Uniswap ecosystem, where I guess some Harvard endowment fund um, voted the Uniswap treasury to pay uh, a secondary fund $20 million to be used for lobbying with no oversight. So all that money goes to cronies, political cronies, for maybe nothing, for maybe no value at all, for furthering personal relationships that have nothing to do with the success of Uniswap in particular. I would hate to have that much value vampired from Decred's ecosystem, voting ecosystem. I would hate that so much. As a holder and a stakeholder, I feel it would be robbing from me. But I'm not a big stakeholder. So if there is a big stakeholder, it is possible that there could be collusion to do detrimental things like that. And the main challenge of what Decred needs to improve is fiercely protecting distribution among its voices and keeping participation up. And it's not easy to do. There are some proposals that I open my wallet and I think, oh, I can't believe I missed the vote on that. I would have liked to vote on that. It's the human problem. It's not Decred's problem, but Decred inherited it. And the best I can say is that if you care about the long-term value, you have to participate. You have to prevent that stuff from happening, or at least be a voice, because discussion prior to a vote is where you can fight against a larger bag with an equally loud voice. And I've seen a lot of proposal systems be milked for ridiculous value, paid up front for something that never gets delivered. I'm thinking a lot of what I saw in like Dash masternode voting, superblock voting type stuff, which early on it just got milked. People made themselves rich. They paid themselves, they spun it into more masternodes, and they did it again. It was Sybil attacked by voting, and Dash survived nonetheless, but it soured a lot of people on it, and a lot of people think it's a joke now. I don't think Decred's going down that road at all, but we do have to be vigilant about that, because as humans running a DAO, we are vulnerable to influence, and we are vulnerable to all the worst parts of politics and money management. And we're not pros. That's a blessing and a curse. That's a double-edged sword. Like, we are in it to vote in what we perceive are our own interests, and as long as those don't get corrupted or the wool doesn't get pulled over our eyes, I think we'll do a pretty good job. But we gotta stay watching.
Such a timely comment. Thank you for that. And I think that,
Thanks, man.
yeah, I think it's very, very valuable for the stakeholders to hear. Do you have any thoughts on how the current passing? So let's get into some more fun. And some of these, as we've gone through the interview, they make more sense to me now. But
Cool. Okay.
this one's is sort of a high level sort of thing. But do you have any thoughts on how the current passing of wealth from older generations to younger might grow the crypto market?
Oh man, I don't know how it might. I kind of only just pretty confident that it will. I mean, the the best like comparison that I came up with recently, and like I'm not patting myself on the back for this. It's just something I observed and then thought of. I'm like, because as as you may or may not know, or as some people may or may not know, I got really into, during the crypto bear market, collecting Magic the Gathering cards. It was something I liked to do when I was a little kid. And I thought about it, the long term value of it, as I was sort of less collecting and more starting to invest, because I thought, oh, collectibles took a big boom here. So I started thinking, like, what's the fail case of this? And I thought, okay, imagine how yicked out I am when, if like I had a grandparent who left me a bunch of old wooden furniture and like a cabinet full of expensive china, fancy china. Like, that's a burden to me. I don't I don't want that. Like, it had sentimental value to them, but I we were never eating off of it because they were too fancy to eat off of. So um, it's just a burden to me. And I thought, what if something that I think is valuable right now, a card, is too much of a physical burden for my grandkids to deal with? Like, oh, I don't want this piece of paper. Like, how I got to take care of this piece of paper now? Like, I don't want this. It's fragile. It's ancient. Like, get rid of it. That that alone would be enough to convince anybody that, like, the physical space and value is going to matter less and less and less. You don't want to have your value stored in insecure physical places. As we get more population in the world, we start living closer together, and people start getting more and more desperate whenever there's a crisis because there's not enough stuff to go around. Physical stuff is easy to see and easy to take compared to virtual stuff, which, if you don't flex it, nobody knows that it really exists. When everything's virtualized, people know that, well, somebody has priv keys that maybe contain some wealth, but it'll kind of become to decorum to be like, don't mess with me, I won't mess with you. Oh, that person's flexing, oh, that person's keeping quiet. Like, there's a time and place for all of that. But all value is going virtual, I think that's the direction things are headed. And eventually, the real world matters, of course. We subsist off of it, but as there's less and less stuff to go around, the only way people can become enfranchised outside of the physical world is the digital, right? And that's what growth and prosperity means for everybody, is everybody becoming enfranchised.
I really like that analogy, and I there was like an insight that you just kind of gave there that like really was a light bulb in my mind. So thank you for that.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks, man.
So earlier you mentioned, sort of this. This question is the one that makes more sense to me now, but I'll just ask the question.
Yeah,
For normal
cool.
users, what is the safest way to protect their assets in a cold wallet, ledger, Trezor?
Yeah, I would say you should be, unless you're really, really good with computers, don't use a USB stick. Use a Ledger or Trezor hardware wallet to store your assets, and get good at keeping your seed private and secret. I would say have a hot wallet for all your, like, spending and messing around. It can be a mobile wallet, and keep the seed words to that on multiple different cards, so not all in the same place, and don't keep them all at home, so that if you need to restore your wallet, you have some work to do visiting different places, but at least somebody poking through your stuff will only find half of your seed, and you would be able to find and reconstitute it, restore your wallet, and change your seed and rescue your assets faster than somebody else looking for them. And your cold wallet seed, there's a lot you can do with that. There are tools to imprint it on, like, steel that will last 1,000 years, and there are people that split their seed words up across multiple of those steel imprinted devices and keep one in their home, one in a safety deposit box, one with their lawyer, one with a family member, and one far, far away in, like, a postal PO box that they never open in a small town that they've never been to, or something like that. There's different ways to secure your stuff, but I think getting familiar with hot and cold wallets is really important. Recognizing that it's good that it's a burden for you to access your own assets for the sake of security, especially with cold wallets, is a really important thing to get used to. Like convenience is good, but convenience for you is also convenience for an attacker. And I say this as someone who's been hacked 4 times and lost a lot of digital assets. I would let too much value store up in a place that was too convenient for me to access, and somebody else accessed it and took it all. And it hurt. And I didn't learn. So I hope everybody else can learn from my own mistakes and carelessness. But that's security.
For
That's what
sure.
I think about it.
For sure. If Decred were a Mount Gox single, what would it be?
Oh, that's like a Magic the Gathering single, I guess. Because yeah, Mount Gox was the old Bitcoin exchange that was a repurposed domain for like trading Magic cards, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. I must have.
That's where.
Yeah, Magic the Gathering single. That's what I
Yeah,
must
yeah,
have
I
misspoke.
know it's cool. I wasn't sure if you knew that piece of the history or not, but like I think there's a lot of crypto and Bitcoin people who are big into Magic cards. It's a weird crossover that I don't really understand myself. I saw this question when you sent it to me, and I tried to think of it. Um, Tried to think of a good answer to it. So the biggest and best card in Magic the Gathering is a Black Lotus. It's enough valuable card that it's like a meme. It's like a Charizard and Pokemon cards, which also kind of blew up this year. Um, but the Black Lotus is not just the most powerful card. There's a whole set of 9 cards called the Power Nine, and the other 8 of them are almost as powerful as the Black Lotus, but not quite. So Decred's logo is blue and green, and there's blue and green colors in Magic the Gathering. So uh, there would be a Mox Sapphire and a Mox Emerald. That's what Decred is. It's those two. So it's like almost as powerful as Bitcoin, but not quite. The thing about the Black Lotus is that once you use it, it goes away. And the thing about the Mox Sapphire and the Mox Emerald is they stick around to be used and reused. So Decred's those 2 cards. It's a couple Moxes.
I love that answer. I'm more of
Cool.
the Pokemon generation and knew enough about Magic, just from having to go to the same comic stores and gaming stores and stuff.
Yeah.
But I didn't
Cool. Cool.
know about those cards.
Oh yeah. What? Okay. So if Decred was a Pokemon card and Bitcoin was Charizard, what do you think Decred would be?
If Bitcoin's Charizard, then Decred is Articuno.
Oh shit! I don't even know Articuno. I feel dumb.
He was one of the legendary birds. So you might know Zapdos, the yellow
Okay. Yeah.
bird.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Articuno was the blue
Yeah.
one.
Oh, okay. Cool. Cool. Okay. I know the yellow one. All
Well,
right. Now I know.
yeah, I would actually say I would say Bitcoin is the Mew two or the Mew maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Rather than
Me too.
Charizard, because they're not as powerful as the legendaries.
Right.
And so
I was
then
more
we're
thinking of
Articuno.
like the value of the Charizard of the value of the Charizard card, which
Oh,
is
okay.
ridiculous right now. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
likening it to the card. But as far as characters go, yeah, like I don't know a whole lot about Pokemon. I was like just a little too old, but I know that Mew and Mewtwo are like the apex. Like you can't make a Pokemon more powerful than
Yeah.
those.
So,
Cool.
so I guess coming very close to the end here, you must be a collector of physical items as well. So, what's your favorite physical collectible?
Oh man, it's so weird because I try to minimize clutter and collection that doesn't mean much at this point in my life. But when I was a kid, I would collect a lot of different stuff, so much so that I would be proud that I had a collection of collections. And this is gonna give you too much of an insight into people calling me a shitcoiner. But my favorite collection was a collection of brochures that I picked up from like my family traveling around and doing road trips. And it was only my favorite collection because I had 1,718 of them. It was only my favorite collection because it was my biggest one, even though the stuff in it was worthless pamphlets from roadside like gas stations and stuff.
That's hilarious.
So that's unit bias for you, man. That's like That was my favorite collection, so much that I remembered how many I had even today. And they're all in the garbage now, obviously. But
I love that answer. Um, in the past, apparently, you've said you keep notes on people on Twitter. Why do you do that?
okay, so I try to first of all remember who I'm talking to, and it's not like um, you know, keeping tea on somebody to spill later. It's not like that. More over like I just have a bad memory. I'm kind of face blind if I see somebody I know out of context, like I'll blank on their name or I'll even blank on who they are when I really shouldn't. And multiply that on Twitter by like tens or hundreds of thousands of people, some of whom might be using like five different alt accounts, and I'm I really, really heavily rely on reading over past conversations before I talk to people. So, in the absence of that, uh, or as a shorthand for that, I'll make a note of what me and somebody else talked about. Or if somebody does something like really kind of sneaky, but that's not obviously bad, that's the only time I'll make like a negative note about what somebody did. Just so that I like if somebody does something bad and gets away with it, I make a note of that so I can be like, hey, by the way, this person raising money right now is the person who didn't pay back these investors for this or whatever, right? Like that's basically what it is. It's mostly for me, but it's more to like make sure kind of be protective of the space and as much as I can. Um, if someone's continually getting away with something that they shouldn't, and it's hurting people that would otherwise be getting a good experience or a good first experience in cryptocurrency in general, then I try to like at least blow a whistle on that. But that happens fairly rarely, and I try not, like it's even worse if I'm wrong. So I try not to do that too often, and mostly the notes are just private. But yeah.
Do you know any crypto OGs who silently hold Decred?
Oof. I mean, not not really that talk about it, but I would imagine that um, that people have a bag. I don't want to out anybody that does and doesn't want people to know. Here's the thing: like as soon as um, through and through anonymity started becoming a possibility in Decred's service set, I'm a lot more hesitant to talk about who owns it and who might be owning it because it's all on the Twitter record, right? Like I don't want to dox my own holdings. Like I can't hide that I've got skin in the game right now, but like I don't talk about like I wouldn't go tweet that like I bought like 10,000 staking tickets the other day, and I'm using a number that ridiculous to obfuscate the number that I might actually be able to afford. But yeah, I don't know of anybody in particular, but you and I both know the big names of some people that have been public about their Decred holdings and their prospects for it for the future. And I only hope that there are enough silent holders that those larger public voices never get to that point that we talked about, which is they start exerting undue influence over the voting system and swinging it more and more their way. But I'm pretty confident with how things have gone so far with Decred's voting system. Like we haven't screwed it up yet, so let's not.
This question is the last. It just came in actually on the
Oh
thread
yeah,
here. Does crypto mining contribute to the real economy? This is from Theo. This just came in the live stream, and then I have one last one, which I think is a fun one.
yeah, sure. Crypto mining contributing to the real economy. Like I guess it's predicated on what you call the real economy. I guess it rents space from warehousers or whatever, so it's paying rent to a landlord. That's like economical. It's employing technicians to keep machines running and replug stuff and turn things off and on again, which is a surprising number of hands-on events in a given day or week, or running anywhere, like having to swap out old equipment depending on the size. It's it's about the same economic footprint as a data center. You know, if there's stuff running in a data center, you got to have someone around to take care of it. You got to have a building to put it in. You got to have maintenance. You have all that. So it's lower than some labor intensive things, but it's definitely part of the real economy, at least as far as it goes in the physical world. And then, of course, you got the output, which is, you can call cryptocurrency part of that real economy or not, but it's definitely an economy, a part of an economy.
Absolutely. This last question, I'm not sure why someone asked me to ask you, but I had not even seen this website, and it's any word on DCR.to.
um, yeah, I'm not. I could check the URL right now and see if it exists. But have you heard of XMR.to?
I have not.
Have you? Okay, so XMR.to is a service where you send that site. It's a service for completely anonymizing Bitcoin transactions using an XMR bridge. So you send Bitcoin to xmr.to, you specify the destination address, and it has a certain amount of mixing funds. I'm not sure if it's centralized or what, but it will route that Bitcoin to Monero and spend Monero. So Bitcoin in, Monero out. I think it even does Bitcoin in, Bitcoin out with the Monero obfuscation inside
Hmm.
somehow. But it might be just Bitcoin in, Monero out. Really easy site to reproduce with Decred, especially once anon functions are fully tested and working on Decred. Bitcoin in, Decred out. It's an easy service to replicate.
Okay, that makes so much sense to me. I went to the website and it was just like coming soon, so I was like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to ask this question, but okay, makes sense.
Yeah, no, it wasn't anything that I had any involvement with or anything like that. But
Yeah,
there's an XMR based, a Monero based analog, and that's what it does. It's pretty useful. I don't know about a lot of people that talk about using it, but that's due to the nature of the privacy element, right?
for sure, for sure. Not so fast. I want to say thank you, and a special thank you because you've given me an hour and a half of your time, which is this is it's more than I could have asked for, and I'm very thankful that you were able to answer all these questions. I know the community is very thankful. I want to give the last word to you before we close out here. Anything that you'd like to say, anything for the stakeholders, or something that I didn't mention that you'd like to end with.
No, honestly, nothing but the thanks goes both ways, man. Eduardo, my gratitude to you for taking the time to reach out to me and to develop this list of questions and to be running Decred in depth. You're an asset to the Decred community. I'm so thankful that you're a part of this. Thank you, man, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. That actually is very kind coming from you. So thanks. I Yeah. Okay, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next live stream. Uh, Not so fast. Hopefully, we can have you on again sometime in the future. Thank you.
I love it, man. Thanks again.